Hi, this is Carrie, and welcome to Tandem Talks, a podcast meant to empower you to live your life your way.
And I'm Craig. Join us as we go deeper with entrepreneurs and their journey creating success in business and life. Good afternoon, folks, and we are here on a very special episode with Frank of 5 Questions from Frank. And many people may not know, but he has a long list of accomplishments, and I don't want to list it all because it will take our whole podcast time. But I've got to give people a little bit of an insight into all the different things he has his hand in and ways that he's created success. Really sharing that he's come from a humble background. He is now the founder and owner of EBM, which is essentially Employee Benefits and Technology Solutions. It's done really well. He's had another amazing year, as he just mentioned to us. He's also on the Council for Young Entrepreneurs. He's a board of directors and volunteer engagement chair for cystic fibrosis, obviously willing to give back. He's a contributing writer for Forbes. He's also an international speaker, or at least a nationally recognized speaker, and has done so many neat things in his life in so many different facets that we're really excited to go there with him. And one of the themes of our show is to talk to people who built real businesses and then are also doing things on social or other areas to come back and impact people positively. And I know when Frank and I had a chance to do his 5 Questions with Frank podcast, I think it was sometime last year, probably about 6 months ago, maybe a year ago even. I asked him, well, like, why are you doing all this stuff on social media? And I think for him, it's as much about giving back and just general brand awareness versus like being transactional. And so we really respect everything you've done. Frank, again, I could go on and on with a list of accomplishments, but let's get down into it a little bit and see if we can drive some value for our listeners. Can you just share a little bit, kind of on your journey, how you got into side hustling, why, and then how you were able to kind of take that to the next level and just a little bit of your story and kind of where you're at now. We'd love to hear that background.
You bet. Cool. Definitely excited to be on with both of you. You were both very gracious guests of mine on my show, so really thankful for that. So excited to be here and share with your audience. My journey into, you mentioned like the side hustle. I think like many people who have a side, you start the side hustle while you have your main hustle. So I had a job that had put me through college. Wasn't my dream job. I was working 11 at night to 7 in the morning in a paper factory back in the early 2000s, so just about 20 years ago. And I liked the job. It wasn't the worst job. I loved going in. I was excited about it. We did some cool stuff, making photo paper back when people used to actually print their photos out at home. And so we used to make that type of photo paper for like Kodak and big brands. And that job helped me to go to school. I couldn't go to school. I couldn't afford school on my own. And that job afforded me to go to school. So they had a tuition reimbursement program and basically covered my expenses, that and some academic scholarships I had. So I was 11 at night, 7 in the morning. I'd get out of work and I'd just go home, kind of get ready real quick, and I'd head to school. And I did that full time. Would have a full workload of school. I'd get home exhausted. Eat some food, whatever, do some studies. And then I would take a quick, nap for a few hours. And then I'd go back to work, again, 11 at night. And then I'd work and do rinse and repeat. And while I was at work, I used to try to squeeze in there used to be some downtime. I'd squeeze in some homework and stuff, but graduated. And while I was going to school, I first went to school for business. I thought I was going to be this business guy. And, I switched it up because, and I think this is an important part. I needed a computer. And again, we're talking 20 years ago. So this was like the beginning of like the internet and stuff. So I needed a computer and I didn't have one. Back then they were extremely expensive. There was no way I could afford one. I used to have to go to the computer lab. And I went online to not online. I went to a publication that was called Bargain News. And it's like the modern day Craigslist, the paper version of Craigslist. And I found a guy who was selling some computers, and he had it was like parts, he said. So I went to his house, and he had this like massive house. I remember going into the driveway. It was just, he was definitely rich compared to me. I was just like, wow, this is awesome. And he gave me all this computer stuff. He gave it to me. Like, he was selling it at first, and then I started talking to him and started telling him my story. And he was like, take all this, $50. And he's like, and I was like, I couldn't believe it. I was so pumped. And he was like, I'm charging you $50 because I don't want you to think that you got this for free. I want you to remember there was a price to pay for this. And I was just like over the top, took it home, parts everywhere. And I was like, this is amazing. I love computers. And I changed my major to computer science. So I think that's an important part, because I think a lot of times along our journey, we think we're going in one direction and then it's like, so that's a kind of important part. I usually don't even tell that part of my story, but I feel
that's a super cool story. It's like out of a movie premise.
So switched the major, computer science, fell in love with it, and was like, kind of became the computer guy, especially at my company. There's several hundred people work there. And I used to tinker around and do stuff with computers and things like that. And people got to know me. People who had computers, to get a computer fixed, it was not cheap. So if you had to hire someone back then to come to your home to fix a computer, you're looking at a couple $100 probably. I would be like, I'll do it. Let me bring your tower and I'll troubleshoot it. So that became a side hustle for me. At first I would do it for free. And then when I knew what I was doing, I was like, all right, well, give me $25. I was making like $14 an hour. So I was like, give me $25. And so that's what I did. I was doing that as my side hustle. And then I don't know how far you want me to go, because I can talk forever, but that's how my side hustle began. I had a full-time job, was going to school, and then I started fixing computers on the side because it's just what my passion was and what I loved. Yep.
Yeah. And then if we flash forward a little bit, it sounds like that was ongoing. And then at some point, I think it was 2003 or so, you got laid off. And then that's when you really started to make that bigger shift towards becoming a full-time entrepreneur. Was it with that specific industry, or had you already evolved or changed, or what was that? What did that look like?
Yeah. So the company again, I thought my career path was like, I was going to stay with this company. They were, again, big firm, multiple locations. I was going to stay there and work my way up to the front office. And, anyone who's worked in blue collar, I was basically a factory that I was working in. There was all divisions of people doing different stuff. And it was like so cool. It was like the forbidden fruit up front where the people with the suits and ties went in. And I was like, man, I want to do that one day. I want to go in that entrance. And I wanted to be the IT person for this company. I figured I was going to get my degree. They wanted me to stay there. There was like an agreement where you had to stay for several years. And I'm like, well, they paid for my school. Why wouldn't they employ me as their IT person? And one morning I went into work and they called me and they were like, Noreen wants to see you in the cafeteria. I was Noreen Connolly. She was a plant manager. I remember this day. So cool to me. And I walk in and she's at this round table in the back of the cafeteria. And I sit down and she has like this paper in front of her and she's like, we're going to lay you off. And I was just like, first I was like, 20, young kid. And I'm like, what? I'm the best person you have on your team. I'm the best in the department. And I'm the high performer. I worked my butt off. I knew everything about my job and I just loved it. Even though it wasn't my passion. I was passionate about what I did. So they laid me off, 2-week severance. And I was like, I'm going to try this computer thing full time. I'm going to give it a shot. And that was the start of a long journey. I remember I walked in my area in Connecticut, and I walked on the main roads called the Post Road, and there was all businesses. And I would walk and go into an office and say, hey, you're looking for IT support? I'd have this, my card, kind of sort of official little sheet with my services. And I did it for days and days and days. I walked and walked and walked. I would drive and just park and I would walk for miles. And then, people would be like, oh, thank you for coming in. And I would just no soliciting signs. I'd be like, I'm soliciting, I don't care. And I would go in. Yeah. It was a rough journey. I didn't make money for a while. Yeah, it was tough, but that was the start of it. I said, I'm going to go all in on this side hustle and turn that into my main hustle.
Yeah. And so why not just go get another job? What was the impetus? Like, what was the real driver there?
I was shunned. I was scorned about being laid off. I never wanted to be laid off again. I wanted to control my own destiny. And that I decided that if I can, I mentioned this a lot. Like, I made a bet on myself. Like, I've done it numerous times over the past 2 decades where I was just like, if not me, if I can't bet on me, then what's a better bet? So that was it. I didn't want to be laid off again.
Well, that's pretty profound in terms of like a life philosophy and specifically as an entrepreneur. And I love hearing about the genesis stories of business owners because it really brings me back to my first couple of years as a business owner and like the hustle and sweat and tears and just like the really hard parts that I don't think are on the Instagram stories. And I don't know that people are prepared into how challenging and tough it can really get. So I'd love to hear you speak. If you have any other fun stories, just, I talk about enjoying the grind and like how you hustled and how you fought through some of those growing pains and anything fun that you can share that really speaks to the heart of like the hard work behind it.
Yeah, I mean, it is important because the perception is, especially today. I mean, I have a nephew, he's 18 years old. I mean, first of all, he idolizes me, which is awesome, but he is from a generation where these kids see social media like Instagram and these other social media platforms where it's glamorized. It looks like everyone it's like, oh, he's doing it. He's, they got this, they got that. And it's a highlight reel of stuff that's probably not even, I mean, these days you can rent 20 minutes to go take pictures on a helicopter or a jet and stuff like that. I mean, that's a real thing today, which is scary because anyone can do it. So yeah, it's been so glamorized now where, I mean, like you realize obviously both of you from grinding it out where you're like, nah, it's not like that. So yeah, I mean, for me, there's a sign behind me that says the good thing about coming from nothing is if I ever have to go back, I know exactly what it feels like because I know what it's like. And even though I come into this office every day, that sign, and I bought that sign back when I first started EBM, that sign's followed me to all of our offices. When I walk into my office, I see that sign every morning. So for me, that's just a constant reminder, not only of growing up, but also what it took to get to where I'm at today, because it's not easy. It wasn't easy. I wish that someone gave me a couple $1 million and said, hey, go start a company. We got your back. We'll fund you. It was, I wouldn't change it though. I think I remember those walks. I remember the no. And you start to get defeated. You start to feel like, oh man, did I make a mistake here? Am I built for this? Who am I? I can't do this. And you start to question everything. And of course, everyone else is questioning you, your family and stuff. And like, are you making any money? What are you doing here, kid? So you do start, the outside starts to come in on you. So I feel like those things are natural. For me, it worked out and I got, it's like a client, and then I got a big client and it was like, oh man, and then it's a validation. And then I start to use that client to say, hey, I do the work there. And then over time I built the company and it was great. It was so much fun. But the best times for me is looking back and seeing like how much of a struggle that I went through because it's just an awesome journey and it's just so crazy how things have changed.
Yeah. And it's interesting too, how as an entrepreneur, you're so much underpaid early on. And then eventually you hit that tipping point where you become overpaid, but then it's hard to explain that to other people. Right. And how do I really like drive that point home when people are in the grind and they're not seeing the results? There really is. I love what you said. I had a willingness to bet on myself. Like that's really powerful. One of the things that's kind of interesting and one of the things we talk about in our book is just the importance of the who, right? And everybody talks about the why and the how and different aspects, which is valuable. But a lot of times there's someone who sparked that. There's somebody that you had access to. And it's kind of an interesting story you had about somebody giving you some free computer equipment. And what if your life hadn't had that experience, right? Like what would the trajectory of your life be, right? Looking back on those first couple of years, when you think about it, what comes to your mind in terms of advice and general tips that you might share, maybe one or two of the top things that an aspiring entrepreneur should be thinking about or keep in the forefront of their mind as they begin that journey? What comes to mind?
I would say don't underestimate those. There's things that we go through, like me getting the computers from the guy is a perfect example. Because he knew, I think he knew what he was doing for me more than I knew what he was doing for me. I think him saying, because he was, I mean, it's so crazy. Like I vividly remember hit the garage. It was a massive garage, his green lawn. It was because for me, I'd never seen none of that. I didn't even know people who had that type of stuff. So his house was beautiful. I remember all these things, but I think him giving me that stuff, I think he knew. Like what, and I don't know what he did, and I wish I knew his name. There's so much. I was like, God, I wish I could find that guy now. But I think he knew what he was doing for me. Charging me the $50 was like, I want this kid to remember that he didn't get this for nothing. And as he told me that, and I drove away, and I did remember that. Like it stuck with me. So I think for people, there's small things that happen in your life that are going to make huge impacts on you that you may not even recognize. Small little nudges, like, for me, the butterfly effect. I feel like small little things happen and it's like, whoa, I just, did this and then this happened. And all these little pivots that we make in our life, I think we need to have some perception sometimes and realize like, okay, some of these things could be happening for reasons like one door closes, another door opens, some of that stuff that, you hear that all the time, but it's real, especially in a journey through being an entrepreneur. So I would say that there's people that will come into your life that are going to impact you and you don't even know it yet. And I think that that's an important part of my journey was that there were people who have come in and out of my life that, for one reason or another have helped shape me to be the man that I am today, personally and professionally. So welcome people into your life. Some people are kind of there's, of course, you got to hold some people at bay, but there's a lot of people who want to do good and help you. And I would say, take it, especially when you're starting to grow something.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, there's an element of being open to that association and mentorship and that guidance that sometimes people face maybe a level of distrust or resistance, or they've got that entrepreneurial, like, I'm going to totally gut this out on my own. And they miss so much opportunity and thought process on the way, I think. So I appreciate you speaking to that. And one thing that Craig and I are very big proponents of, we teach a lot, is building a strong foundation. And never, working to create wealth at the cost of a healthy family relationship or your own health. And I just feel like you really embody that. I know you're a really great dad from following your content. You've got a great marriage. You look like a healthy dude. You look like you work out. You're volunteering. You're doing all these things to empower your family and create bigger impact. And what advice do you have for people? Because I don't think that's easy. I don't. I think that's a lot to manage. Mm-hmm. And any suggestions or thought process you could speak to that's helped you get there. Maybe it wasn't always that way. If there's anything you can share you've learned.
Yeah. So first of all, that's a good point that it wasn't always that way, because at one point, not so long ago, I was someone who, was the material type of guy. I was like, I can't wait to make money so I can do these things and have these physical objects. I did have that mentality. And I think it's not the worst thing. I think many people go through that because they think that that's success. I think growing up, you see success and it's like, okay, like me, this guy, the guy I got the computers from, he's got a lot of money, he's successful. And I don't know if that guy was happy when he went back in his home, but I know that, looked pretty successful. So I think that's just natural that we see success as, these tangible assets that we can acquire. So for me, it wasn't always like that. I think when you start to actually make money, and it's something that I think I wish I didn't have a real true mentor in my life, where someone who kind of took me under their wing and was guiding me time over time. And I didn't really have that. So I figured out a lot of things on my own. And I wish that someone would have explained real success to me too, one day, here's what success is. Cause now I see success is not material. Success, I often say you strip all the material things away in your life and see not what's left, but who is left. And it's the people that you surround yourself with. And money doesn't buy that. You get to a point in your life where you can buy anything you want. And I'm not some big shot rich person, but I can buy things that I never could imagine I can buy. Doesn't make me happy. So things today that make me happy are spending time with my family, or being able to take a trip, or just to walk away and from the office and not have to go into the office for a day. So those things are extremely important to me. Going to the gym, having my me time. I think everyone needs to take that time and have that for themselves and not chase the constant, the money thing, because it's really, the more money you make, you can go buy more stuff, and then you have a lifestyle change, and then you're going to need to continue to make all that money. And now I realize that, yeah, I like nice things. I mean, sure, I make money. I want to have, reward myself and pat myself in the back, but that's not the be all end all. I think you get one mind, you get one body. And if a time comes to it and this mind goes or my body goes, all the money in the world is not going to be able to help me. And it won't matter. So that's kind of a philosophy for me.
Yeah. And how, just to go a touch deeper, like how have you been able to like prioritize that? Because I know especially early on in my entrepreneurial journey, it was like, dude, I was almost wanted to marry my business. Right. And then all of a sudden, we fall in love, and then it's like, I have to kind of compartmentalize all those things. And I don't know that especially early on, I did a great job, and I'm still continuing to learn, but how have you been able to compartmentalize that? Obviously, the high level thought process is there, but any specific tips or strategies that you use for that?
Yeah, I mean, let's not get it twisted. If you want to start a company, you're going to have to work your way.
Exactly.
I started this company, EBM, I started 8 years ago, just over 8 years ago, and my wife was pregnant. So it was like not the best time to be starting a company, but she had, so here we go. We bring my daughter into this world, and I am working my butt off. I mean, when people say, like, I was working, on average, probably 19, 20-hour days. I would work. And that's what my focus was on, because I knew that, okay, now life isn't, it's not just me anymore, my wife, whatever, but it's not just, I have a child now, someone who's going to rely on me and need me and depend on me. So I needed, again, to bet on myself. I can't lose. So I did, I worked, there was times where I just worked, but I'll tell you, as you start to put in time and you get to a point, I think it's really important to start looking at the way you run your business and what you can start to delegate. I feel like you can start bringing in, even if it's not a full-time person, you can bring in nowadays VAs and stuff like that to start getting stuff off your plate. The sooner you can do that, the better it's going to be for you, because you can focus more on stuff that really where your time is valued. And then again, you hire, a full-time employer, you start to hire people, and then you can start to delegate stuff. I mean, now I'm at a point now where I've got a whole team of people that they're doing stuff that I used to do. I used to have to do all these things. And now it's like, okay, you're in charge of this, you're in charge of that. So I have the freedom now, finally, to be able to do this stuff. I mean, I am Monday, Wednesday, Friday. You can't even think about getting to my calendar after 3:00 because I go to the gym at 3:45 and I'm at the gym and I'm that's my gym time. It's booked the whole year. You can't get in there. I don't, in the morning, I wake up with my daughter and I'm home, family time. I bring my daughter to school, and that's something that's us. So it's like, that's my time. Like, these are things that I don't break for anyone now. So I am very religious about my calendar now, my schedule, and making sure that I make me time. One thing I'll add is and I've said this before, but I just love it. Not just because I said it, because I've heard other people say it now. And there's a reason why when you get on an airplane, they tell you to put your oxygen mask on first, and then worry about the people next to you. And that reason is because if you're not healthy, if you're not operating at 100%, there's no way that you're going to be beneficial to anyone else, whether it's a family member, whether it's a friend, whether it's your team. You need to be taking care of you so that if you're operating, you're walking around at 50%, what good are you to anyone else? Nothing. You're not at all. So I realize that. And taking care of myself that's an absolute priority in creating time for me and the things that are important to me.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing kind of that timeline, because it is really interesting where early on, it's like you're just gunning and hitting it hard. And if you're in your 20s or single, it's like, it's easier to do that. But as life evolves, we have to get a little smarter. And hopefully if we've created a successful business, like for us, we've had the freedom to now launch a nonprofit or write a book and start a podcast, right? Like do some things that are more fun and giving back. And I think it's important to recognize that along the journey, so you don't get caught in that tunnel for eternity and miss other things that might be more important. So thanks for sharing on that. One thing there's a lot of interesting things about your story, but I know you started out like very humble, right? And so now you're finding yourself in this very probably different position than as you grew up. But I know another thing that's interesting too is you've had a chance to meet Gary Vaynerchuk and talk to him, and he's given you some advice and stuff. And when I had done your podcast, I said, well, why are you on social? Like, why? Because you're producing so much content. Your work ethic is obviously awesome. And I know it's not transactional because you're never promoting something, just like we've been on there now. And we're not like saying like, buy this widget or buy that, right? And you said you had gotten that advice from him about just posting content and building a brand, right? So can you talk just a little bit about like maybe that advice, that relationship, what that's been like, and or like just moving into building a brand and why that's been valuable and why you might recommend that for a lot of entrepreneurs?
Yeah, Gary, like many people who have tuned into Gary Vaynerchuk, he's sort of what I call, was a one-way mentor to me. There's plenty of mentors out there. So people say, like me, I didn't have a physical mentor, but there's one ways, there's the people out there, whether it's Gary or Grant or whoever it is, they're going to feed you information you can take and digest what you want, and the rest you can, discard. But Gary was someone I found. I met him in May 2018. I probably had been following his content for about 2 years, and just watching his stuff and kind of consuming things and whatever, and had the chance to meet him. And really was just, I didn't go into there thinking I was going to come out of the meeting with him, like with the advice that he gave me. I went there sort of from a business perspective. Hey, I've got, it's like, I got a $5 million business. How do I turn it into a $10 million business? That was my mentality. How do I want to grow? I want to scale. What do I do? What are the things that you would do if you owned my company? And out of it, I was miraculous. I was doing some really good things in my business where he was just like, you're doing some awesome stuff. And I wasn't doing anything around, the brand and the marketing. And he was like, you need to start creating video. He said his exact words were, make video on LinkedIn. He's like, it's going to change your life professionally and personally. That's what he said to me. And I was sitting there. I remember I was just sitting there. And I'm like kind of laughing to myself, like, who's going to want to listen to me? Like, what do I have to offer? And it took me several months, but that was May 9th, 2018. I made my first video, I think November 18th. Of 2018. So it took me several months getting advice from the guy, Gary Vee tells you to make something. I should have ran out of there and made the video, but it took me several months. And so I started creating content on LinkedIn specifically, and, didn't really kind of know the whole brand thing like at first. Right. I'm just doing it just because I thought it was cool to share and educate. And then after a while, it was like people started recognizing me when I went places, and people were responding to my content and asking me to speak and do all these things. And I'm like, okay, this is pretty awesome. And that's, so it's been now just over 2 years. It's been a hell of a ride. It's been so much fun.
Yeah.
Well, I love the Frankie Baby branding. I think everything about your brand is just so high value, high energy, and just so authentic. So I've loved getting to know you through your content and appreciate that. And I think you really represent like what a good personal brand can be and how it does seep into all these other opportunities, whether it's public speaking or scaling your business. So I appreciate you speaking to that. And one question I have that I think humanizes the business experience for people, especially while they're in the thick of it and they're making mistakes, they're effing things up, they're, overdoing some things, underperforming in other areas. Like, what was like one of your biggest mistakes or your biggest blunders that you can speak to that can maybe help people be like, okay, it's okay to mess some things up. I'm going to work through it.
Yeah. So I love the question. Just so I recently updated my LinkedIn headline because it was like entrepreneur in there, and I put 5X startup founder.
I noticed that, and I was like, "Is that a company, or did he start 5 companies?"
Yeah. So because again, it's sort of the thing, and I've talked about this with other people. Like they're like, "Oh yeah, well, I'm working on my 5th company," and people will pick it up. And anyone who does the research is like, "Look, I checked out your LinkedIn profile. What's going on here? So the numbers don't add up." Well, not every company was a success. So I've now learned to embrace it. Because I started companies that didn't work out. And one of them in particular was probably my biggest learning experience. I started IT Solutions, which was turning into a very successful company after a while. And I was like, this is awesome. So I branched. I'm an IT guy in the computer space, doing hardware, servers, storage, cooling systems, everything. And then now I'm like, control systems. So when I would go into a building, it's alarms, cameras, control, all this access stuff. So I'm like, I'm going to do that. There's a lot of money in that. So I start a Connecticut security and surveillance company. Start that. We get a big contract doing surveillance systems for an organization, daycare centers all across the East Coast. We had the whole contract. So we go in. I set them, did everything from the ground up, the vendors, the equipment, the blueprint on how every school we would go in, we would set them up a certain way. We'd had 16 cameras, DVR, access from the cloud. I mean, everything was all kind of cookie cutter that we did. I laid it all out and designed this whole program. Well, we did probably 20 schools and over the course of a couple of years, and they fired me. They basically took all my ideas and they said, what do we need Frank for? So yeah, I didn't have any, I didn't protect my IP. I didn't have any contracts in place and nothing. And because of the fact that I was successful with IT solutions, I was like, okay, I've gotten successful there. I never had been in that kind of contract sort of phase there where something I needed to protect something. I thought like they need me. They didn't. They hired people. They stole my vendors. They had all the stuff that they need, all the cameras, everything, and they hired cheap labor to go in and pull wire and do all the stuff that me and my crew were doing. And that was it. Like they were my biggest client, and the company ceased to exist. So that was my biggest, protecting your IP, whether it's physical stuff, whether it's in your brain, you need to protect yourself contractually. And that was my biggest, that was an amazing learning experience for me.
Yeah, totally. That's quite the one on the chin, I think. I'm sure that stung a little bit. It also makes you smarter though. I mean, I've done for sure some similar things where you're just like, oh, I was just so naive. It wasn't that I had bad intentions. It was just naive. Right. Mm-hmm. And you got to have those too. And it's fun to talk about for sure. So, moving forward, like what's on the horizon for you? What's new? What's hot? Like what's something either you've learned recently or, where are you going? And then also a little bit, how do we support you? How do our listeners support you going forward?
I'm excited for the future. I think people, people had their own opinion about 2020 and, this and that. It was, I can't wait to get behind, away. I think I learned a lot in 2020, like we were talking about when we first got on, we had one of our best years yet, so it's sort of bittersweet because of course I have clients that went out of business. I know friends that lost their companies. So it is, but for me, it was a great year. So I'm super optimistic about the future of not only my company, but about just all the great things that I have the opportunity to do. I started a real estate holding firm in the middle of COVID, in the middle of the pandemic, which is another huge risk that I made. So I'm excited for that. I want to buy more properties, residential and commercial. I think that there's money to be made in there if you make the right decisions. So from a business growth, I'm more positive than ever. For me personally, as my business grows, I'm getting into a point now in my life where I am very grateful for things. I have when I wake up in the morning, I have this routine where the first thing I do, I'm laying there and I sleep with this eye mask on. I take my eye mask off and I think about something happened the day before, whatever it is. It could be something huge, could be something small, but just think about something that I'm very grateful for. And that's how I start my day. And then I get up and I'm just, go about my day and everything. But I think it's so much happens to us that we just take for granted. And I think if we can just get into a cadence of being grateful for stuff and have this, sort of attitude of gratitude, it's honestly worked for me. Unbelievably, I can't say it enough, where I'm like, stuff happens to you and you're like, that's all right. I'm still I'm breathing, I live to fight another day, because there's people a close friend of mine passed away unexpectedly. And it's like, his wife is, never going to see him again. He's got a 5-month-old daughter gone. And it's like, when things happen like that, it's just like, even more for me, I'm like, enjoy the day, enjoy the moment. I want to plan for the future. I do. I have a 10-year plan. I have a 5-year, 3-year plan. I have my 1-year plan. I have all these plans. Plans might not always happen. So I think it's very important to live in the moment as well and to be grateful for all the things that you're surrounded by.
Yeah.
I love that.
That's really beautiful. And I think that that's emulated in the way you live. And we appreciate and we respect that tremendously. So congratulations one of the things that we talk a lot about is using entrepreneurship or side hustle as a tool to create like a magical life, not as just like an end all be all, right? And so it seems like you've really been able to evolve that. So we appreciate that. And thank you for sharing with us today. One of the things we're just really big on is bringing people closer to like what matters most. And for us, entrepreneurship and family and really being grateful is a really fantastic way to do that. So thanks for sharing.
Yeah. And Frank, where can people find you on the internet? What's the best way to access your content and tap into the Frankie Baby brand?
So LinkedIn is like my number one go-to. I spend a lot of time on LinkedIn for sure. So just, my name, Frank Mengert, you can find me pretty easily, or you can search the hashtag Frankie Baby in the search bar and it'll bring you right to me. And I have a YouTube channel. Again, you can just find me there. On Instagram, I post. I lost my main account for some strange reason, but I had to recreate a new one. So I'm rebuilding my account on Instagram. Yeah. So yeah, I'm in any social media channels, but I mean, LinkedIn is definitely my go-to for showing up and engaging and kind of building a community of people.
Oh, great. Well, definitely check out 5 Questions with Frank. We highly recommend that series. Mm-hmm. And just so appreciative for you spending the time with us and speaking directly to the listeners. I know it'll add a lot of value. And with that, everybody enjoy the grind. Over and out. Thanks for listening to today's episode.
Please subscribe and leave a review, and be sure to visit tandemconsulting.co/talks.